About an American girl who was orphaned by Hamas terrorists and taken hostage. You heard the president mention 13 hostages in the end. 17 were freed yesterday. We'll have a live report from Tel Aviv on the people who are still being held by Hamas, as well as the future of the humanitarian pause in Gaza. Also ahead, the latest developments in the shooting of 3 college students of Palestinian descent in Vermont. The FBI said it is now investigating the attack. We'll have the very latest, plus a tale of 2 Thanksgivings. President Biden sharing a message of optimism and unity.
It's very helpful. Said we need to come together, which I think anybody running for president would be saying the same thing, right?
Sure, absolutely. Donald Trump, on the other hand, former president candidate, spent the holiday rage posting on his social media platform.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, super angry.
He is an angry man.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Show. It is Monday,
he also
November
forgets
27th.
what decade he's in.
There's a lot going on there.
He thinks he's running against Barack Obama.
We have a lot going. We hope you all had a good Thanksgiving.
Angry. Yeah.
With us, we had the host of Way Too Early, White House Bureau Chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire, U.S. Special Correspondent for BBC News, Katty Kay, and columnist and associate editor for The Washington Post, David Ignatius, is with us this morning. And there is a lot to tell you about on this Monday morning. Today is set to be the final day without fighting inside Gaza, unless the humanitarian pause in the Israel-Hamas war is extended, allowing more hostages to be released. Hamas has released 58 hostages since the truce took effect on Friday. 14 Israeli and 3 Thai hostages were released yesterday, including the first American since the pause went into place. Dual national Abigail Edan was released. She turned 4 years old on Friday while being held hostage by Hamas. Her parents were killed in the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th, so she emerges to safety as an orphan. Under the initial deal, Israel agreed to extend the pause 1 day for every additional 10 hostages released by Hamas. On Sunday, Hamas released a statement saying it wanted to extend the truce, but as of last night, there was no official agreement. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's already an outline for an extension to the pause, and he would welcome it, while the Prime Minister of Qatar told the Financial Times the truce could be extended. If Hamas is able to use the pause to locate additional hostages being held by other armed groups. So there's a lot still to work out here. And also the question of how much do they know about where all of the hostages are?
Well,
exactly.
And sadly, the hostages, what's not being said, the hostages that are still alive.
Right.
And we're also talking about the hostages that Hamas actually directly has control over right now. So many questions. David Ignatius, though, I would want to talk about the specifics of extending the truce, but I just feel like we have to stop for one moment because we are obviously focused on the acts of terror against the Israelis, the bombing in Gaza. These are the things that obviously grip us for good reason day in and day out. But if you could talk about the extraordinary work, we haven't discussed this. I know this, so I know you know this far better than me. Talk about the extraordinary work that's been going on behind the scenes by the Biden administration. Every time these hostage deals trip up, it's Joe Biden who gets on the phone, and whether he's cajoling Israel, whether he's cajoling Qatar, whether he's working with our allies across the region. I mean, the last couple of weeks, you really don't see it in the newspapers, but it's been pretty extraordinary. The last couple of weeks have shown how actually 50 years of experience in foreign policy saves lives.
Well, I think you said it just right, Joe. The phrase quiet diplomacy is one we use often, and we're actually seeing a perfect example of that in this process of hostage release negotiation. Going back into the first days after October 7, when there was this terrible nightmare of hostages, the United States began working with Qatar, the country where Hamas political leadership lives, and with which Israel has done business in secret for more than a decade through its intelligence service, to try to see whether a dialogue about release of hostages was possible. I was in Qatar just 2.5 weeks ago, the day before Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, and David Barnea, the head of Mossad, came to Doha to meet with the Qatari prime minister to work out the basic outlines of the hostage deal that we're now seeing implemented. Every time there was an obstruction, a blockage that people were having trouble resolving, President Biden did get involved. He got involved directly with the Qatari leadership. He got involved directly with Egypt, which at some points had a special entree with Hamas to keep this process going. And I think he does deserve credit for using the special power that a president has to get us to these amazing scenes where Abigail and the two daughters of Mayan Zin, who she wrote so movingly about, Daphna and Ella, are being released. These are moments of joy. I just would note, Joe, that built into this process that President Biden helped to create was a notion that more hostages would be released, and there would be a dynamic of more for more. The more hostages you find and can deliver, the longer the pause will be. But we're getting to near the end of that. There's a dilemma for Hamas, which does have difficulty locating all of the remaining, let's say there are about 100 women and children, something over 50 have been released. So there's, let's say, 40, 45 still to go. Some of them are being held by groups that are not easy for Hamas to manipulate. So finding those hostages, getting them released, is going to be a difficult process over the next several days. My guess is that this process will be extended a little while longer, but then it's going to hit a wall, and that's going to create a real dilemma for everybody involved, Israel, Hamas, and the United States.
Joining us now from Tel Aviv, NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez with the very latest. Raf?
Mika, good morning. Israelis are celebrating the release of that third group of hostages last night. And as David is saying, they are warily eyeing this fast approaching deadline when the ceasefire due to expire 7 a.m. local time tomorrow, midnight tonight Eastern. We are hearing hopeful signs, positive sounds from all sides about the possibility that this deal could be extended under those pre-agreed, a symbol of the hostage crisis in this country. This little girl's parents were murdered on the morning of October 7th by Hamas terrorists in the kibbutz Kfar Aza. She managed to walk on her little legs to a neighbor's house. She was sheltered there by that family until they were taken hostage themselves. They were carried into Gaza. She turned 4 years old as a hostage on Friday. And then last night, after 52 days in captivity, she emerged along with the neighbors she was kidnapped with. She is now at the Schneider Hospital here in the greater Tel Aviv area. Her family says she is doing well. Fortunately, it sounds like all of the children who have come out of Gaza so far are doing well. There is concern about one elderly woman. She's 84 years old. She came out last night, and she is said to be in serious medical condition. We don't know the exact details. Because of her condition, the choreography last night was different from what we had seen from the 2 nights prior. Before, we saw these Israeli hostages going from Gaza into Egypt and then crossing back into Israel. But last night, a different setup. They were handed over to the Red Cross in Gaza City, just a few miles from where Israeli forces are positioned. And they crossed directly over the Israel-Gaza border. That elderly woman taken by helicopter to a hospital in Israel. We're starting, guys, to get a first glimpse of the conditions these hostages endured over these last 7 weeks. One little boy, Ohad, he's 9 years old, telling his family that they weren't physically abused, they weren't tortured, but there were days when they went without food, that they slept on hard wooden benches. And he said that there were times when he asked to go to the bathroom and it would be hours before a Hamas guard would take him. He has been reunited with his father. His mother and his grandmother were taken hostage with him. They are now free. But his grandfather, 78-year-old Avraham, is still a hostage. And we have seen that bittersweet note over and over again, that some members of one family will be free, but others remain inside of Gaza. If the fighting does resume again tomorrow, it will be devastating for the people inside Gaza who have been able to get some humanitarian aid over the last couple of days. And of course, it is likely that we will see civilian casualties there rising once again. Guys.
All right. NBC's Raf Sanchez, live from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much. Katty K, it is, again, it's one of the great concerns about continuing to strike these deals, that first of all, the question of the number of hostages that are still alive, and also 40 or so hostages that are being held right now by splinter groups that Hamas doesn't really have that much control over, because as hard as it is to believe that some of those splinter groups even more extreme than Hamas, and don't have any diplomatic arrangements with Qatar or other countries that we can even negotiate with.
Yeah, there was some skepticism of the notion that emerged early on when Hamas said it didn't have all of the hostages, that was possible given that Hamas controls Gaza. But I think actually we've come to the awareness over the last few days, as some of these hostages have come out, that that is the case. We know that on October the 7th, some of the people who went across the border were Hamas, but there were also other civilians from within Gaza, from other groups, who went over and took hostages themselves. And that is clearly a complication. For the Israelis, what's important is getting these people out, obviously, but every single hostage who comes out brings with them snippets of intelligence of how they were held, where they were held, the resources that Hamas had to hold them. And I think, it's interesting that we heard just there from the reporting that one of the hostages who came out said that some days they didn't have food. That gives you an indication of the kind of pressures that the hostage takers are under, that there are days when they can't necessarily feed them, and would also lead you to think that getting rid of more of the hostages, handing back more of the hostages to the Israelis might be something that Hamas is interested in. So the intelligence that comes out with these hostages is very helpful to the IDF as they try to secure the release of some of the others, even if they're not all being held by Hamas. But maybe this pause that we're seeing at the moment, the indications are that Hamas is using that, we hope, to try to find and regroup the other hostages.
Jonathan Lemire, let's talk about the Biden administration and the balance that they're having to strike. Obviously, they're dealing with Qatar and the leaders there. You have obviously Blinken, Sullivan, Bill Burns, Brett McGurk, everybody fanning out across the Middle East, trying to make this work and having success keeping this process moving forward. But talk about the ongoing frustration that the Biden administration has with Netanyahu, the ongoing frustration about Biden's hope, President Biden's hope, that we can see an extension of the ceasefire. And if fighting does resume again, when fighting does resume again, the Israelis take a much more targeted approach. Talk about the frustration the Biden administration has right now about the fact that they still have fears that there may be many more civilian casualties ahead if the Israelis don't focus their attacks more carefully.
Yeah, first, as you just mentioned, all these senior administration officials fanning out throughout the region. The president himself been working the phones throughout the Thanksgiving weekend, holiday weekend he spent in Nantucket when there was a real snag on day 2 of the pause, and it looked like those hostages wouldn't be exchanged that day. The president got on the phone, worked with Qatar, worked with Israel, got that situation resolved, and he has been talking to Prime Minister Netanyahu throughout this crisis, and certainly has expressed Netanyahu privately and also said himself, as when we heard from him yesterday, that he wants this pause to be continued. He is hopeful of this pause being continued, believes this is the best way to ensure the safety of these hostages, that the chances of these hostages getting out, and to your point, we don't know how many are still alive or exactly where they are, but the chances of getting them out really diminish if the fighting resumes in full force. And while he's saying that, he has also made very clear, the president himself has said, members of his administration has said, they hope Israel will have a real targeted approach. And it's been a mixed bag to this point. The U.S. has been leaning on Israel to be selective, to be targeted throughout the conflict. There are moments where Israel listened, other moments where Israel very much did not. But we should mention this, though Netanyahu himself signaled that he might be willing to extend the pause. He also, in a video message released late last night, said that when the fighting resumes, whenever that might be, it will be a full-on war again. So that does not sound like the selective, targeted approach the U.S. is advocating for, and that will be a real tension point going forward.
That makes it even more complicated. Ahead in 1 minute, we're going to go through the new developments in the shooting of 3 Palestinian men of Palestinian descent in Vermont. NBC News Welcome back. A suspect has been arrested in connection to Saturday night's shooting of 3 college students of Palestinian descent in Burlington, Vermont. A 48-year-old white male was detained yesterday after law enforcement found probable cause during a search warrant on his apartment to arrest the suspect. The alleged shooter will be arraigned in court later today. This comes as 2 of his victims are in stable condition, while 1 sustained more serious injuries. The group of friends were in Burlington for Thanksgiving break, having known each other since attending the same Quaker school in the West Bank. The friends were walking to a relative's home at the time of the attack, speaking Arabic and wearing traditional Palestinian scarves. Police say the suspected shooter did not say a word before he fired at least 4 times, hitting all 3 men. The families are asking law enforcement to investigate the shooting as a hate crime.
This is so horrific. These 3 young men actually went to schools across the Northeast, and they met up for Thanksgiving at the home of one of the friends.
In Burlington, Vermont.
In Burlington, Vermont. And then they went out. And now, of course, we have been warned not to immediately jump to the conclusion that it's a hate crime because, of course, that's what happened in Detroit with the woman who was killed, who was a synagogue leader right after the terror attacks, and that ended up not being a hate crime. That said, the fact that these 3 young men are from 3 different colleges, came together to celebrate Thanksgiving, and were just walking down the street, and again, 2 wearing traditional Palestinian scarves, makes it
really
hard to assume it was anything but a hate crime. But again, the FBI will be investigating that, and to talk about that process, let's bring in NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, just an absolute tragedy in Vermont. Talk about what the FBI is going to be looking at.
Well, I think they're going to be looking at a whole host of things. So how this all went down yesterday, according to the chief of police, who emailed reporters directly at 12:33 this morning announcing the arrest, shortly after 3:30 p.m., ATF agents who were in the area of where this shooting occurred apparently encountered the individual who was arrested, who's been identified as Jason Eaton, 48, of Burlington, Vermont, quite close to the shooting. We'll get to that in a second. So they're canvassing the area approximately 3:30 yesterday afternoon. They encounter him. They take him into into custody, and then the U.S. Attorney's Office, along with the Chittenden County District Attorney, the local district attorney there, get a search warrant for his residence shortly before 10 p.m. last night. And according to the chief of police, John Murad, he says that based on that search and based on the information that they developed in the course of the investigation, they developed enough probable cause to make an arrest. Where was that search conducted? It was conducted in the apartment building directly across, apparently, from where the shooting occurred, and that's where this individual lives. So we know that they at least live in that area. He at least lives in that area. And then I think the question here this morning, it is Raymond. We know who, we know how, and the big question, to your point, Joe and Mika, I think is why.
So, Tom, can you tell us a little bit more about, and I know it's early hours here, but what investigators do know about the exchange of what actually happened in that moment before he opened fire, and if there's anything in the suspect's history that would suggest, that would lend further credence to the idea that this might be a targeted or biased attack?
Right. So based on what the chief put out on yesterday afternoon, the shooting which occurred Saturday night, approximately 6:25 p.m., apparently this individual walks up to them and just starts firing, that there was nothing that was said ahead of time. As far as this individual's background, that's something we're still digging through, and I'm sure that they're digging through as well on the law enforcement side. Of course, we know the ATF obviously made the arrest. They're critical with the ballistics information. The FBI there, to Joe's point, I think they're going to try to determine at this point, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office, were there any statements that were made subsequent to that when he was in custody? What did they find at the home? What did they find on his digital media devices to that end? And more direct to Joe's question, the FBI was helpful in this. According to the chief of police and according to the FBI, they were working with their cell site analysis teams, which could, of course, locate where an individual is if they have their cell phone on. But they also had their computer teams, the CART teams there. Perhaps they found something on his digital devices, which at some point here we might find out could be helpful in determining motive.
All right, NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter, thank you very much. Let's go back to David Ignatius and pull out to big picture in terms of the efforts to try and end this war, where it seems like the smaller objectives along the way, whether it be small groups of hostages coming home, how to actually characterize going back into war mode, it seems almost like these objectives conflict with each other.
Mika, I have the same fear. This is a day when we're seeing these joyous images of young children being freed, reunited with their families. We're moved and grateful to everybody involved, including key people in the Biden administration. Israeli officials tell me that they have not given up their fundamental goal here, which is to destroy Hamas politically. And that when this period of hostage releases ends, and that is in a few days by anybody's calculation, they intend to go back to high-intensity conflict. That's the phrase that's been used with me. That sounds like what we were watching on our TV screens before the hostage release process began. And it was very painful for the world to watch that. It led to a lot of anger and outrage. I think Israel's trying to think, how does it go back to war and accomplish its goal of destroying Hamas without getting that same degree of international anger? It's going to be a very difficult problem for them. I think the U.S. will get involved in that. Hard to predict now just exactly what proposals the U.S. will offer. But that's the dilemma that Israel's facing.
David, how clear is the Israeli thinking on the next steps and what the repercussions of those steps will be? So if they go back to full war, how clear are they on the pressure that puts on neighboring Middle Eastern countries and how long the leaders of those countries can withstand that pressure? How clear are they on the response that would come from Europe, even from the United States? I mean, are they having thoughtful, deep conversations about the medium and longer term?
So, Caddy, the hope is that this period of humanitarian pause to allow hostage release has also been accompanied by significant new shipments of aid. We read about 200, 300 trucks that are carrying food, medical supplies, new shelter for people who've been forced to leave their homes. And I think the Israeli hope is that in this environment where there's better attempts to take care of civilians, that some of the pressure may be reduced. These may be more targeted operations. That's been a debate that's been ongoing within the Israeli military now for weeks. Should they move to a period where it's more standoff and you use special forces teams to go in after particular targets when you find them, that would be a less bloody, less troubling thing for the world to watch. I think the hard question will be, it's once you stop a war, starting it again is very difficult. And that's the dilemma that faces Israel in the coming days. We'll have to watch that carefully.
All right, the Washington Post, David Ignatius, we thank you very much, as always, for your insights this morning.
David. I'll tell you, Mika, I just looking this weekend at the papers.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this later, but the New York Times editorial lays out, the editorial board lays out the way forward with the Israel-Palestinian peace process. And there are people that are saying there is no peace process moving forward after these attacks. Well, there has to be. We really don't. We, as Americans, don't have a choice if we're going to continue to be invested as much as we are in Israel and in that region. And Israel doesn't have a choice, as so many Israelis understand. There has to be a way forward. It's hard to see right now, but the New York Times editorial page, I don't always say that, but the New York Times editorial page lays things out very well. And I must say also, in this age of TikTok, where you just have idiot takes on Middle East peace because somebody has seen it on TikTok or Instagram on the Reels for 15 seconds. The New York Times Magazine this weekend lays out the history of the peace process, the failed peace process.
It's vexed American presidents for decades.
It has.
And it's there's not alignment now.
Right.
And that's the fundamental problem moving forward.
But we have to have an understanding of it. And whether you get it from somewhere else or you can, there's a good primer this weekend, again, in the New York Times Magazine. And also a lot of questions to be raised. Everybody's going to disagree with parts of this editorial. But again, if you have somebody that's coming up spewing a bumper sticker mentality over a 2,000, 3,000-year-old conflict, 2,000-year conflict, at least have them read this and discuss it. You can tell them about the parts that you agree with, the parts that you disagree with. But people have to be more informed on this issue, because I think one of the reasons why you have such hate and such division is because people don't want to make this issue anything more than something that you can fit on a bumper sticker.
Exactly. Coming up on Morning Joe, we'll talk more about this. We'll also be joined by a woman who had four.
I didn't
it's exhausting.
Go to the south of France yesterday. I said, well, no. But anyway, I was wondering about malls. And zombie malls as you pass by them. And the Wall Street Journal actually has a story about, these malls that we used to always go to. I can't even imagine how often you were in malls, but growing up.
My dad wouldn't let me go.
We were, that's where people hung out. And now these things have turned in
Spencer's Gifts
to zombie malls.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it's sort of like cities, downtowns. Like, what's going to happen to some of these major places that aren't seeing business anymore, probably turning into maybe housing?
Well, and that's the interesting thing is that financiers are actually holding on to these malls even while the town is begging them. The towns are begging them to sell them because they're not doing it, but they're holding on to it as possible future investments. But you have the zombie malls, and then Caddy. It's something interesting that I noticed this week as I was actually had time to go out to restaurants because, we go to sleep at Mika and I at about 5:30 every evening right before Wheel of Fortune comes on.
Oh, yeah.
I exaggerate just a little bit. But it's interesting, retail, everybody's buying everything on Amazon or they're buying online. So you're seeing retail stores, especially in high rent places like New York, just going bust. I'm starting to notice restaurants in certain areas also having less people inside the restaurants because everybody's ordering in now. they're getting delivery service. It's really, I'm wondering if some restaurants are going to be going the way of some retail clothing stores too. I mean, we're seeing our whole economy, and this zombie mall story talks about it. Our whole economy is changing pretty dramatically.
This is one of those questions, Joe, where I was very glad that you spoke for a while, because I was wondering in my own head, how am I going to get to zombie malls to some kind of sensible answer on this? Okay, so we have had the numbers on this, that over the course of the holiday spending weekend, the sales weekend, the retail market, clearly online the numbers were super good, right? The cyber spending for all of the sales has been great. We don't yet have the numbers for foot traffic in the shops, so we don't know whether people were actually going to the shops. But just this weekend, I was out in Virginia, where we spend sort of 3 or 4 days, try to every week. And in the local town where we go, 3 of the restaurants are up for sale because they say that they can't get hourly labor, they can't get workers to work in the restaurants, and so 3 of the restaurants are going to be up for sale and presumably are going to shut down. It's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Now, whether that's the same as people not going to restaurants and just ordering takeout, or whether that's because there's a labor shortage in the country, which there clearly is, which is another reason to look at the immigration question and what's happening at the border, and come up with some sort of agreement on that, it's not good. It's not good, right? If you have a very small town, which depends on tourism, 3 of the restaurants go under, that's a problem.
Well, and Jonathan Lemire, you know, people are going to look back, I think, even in a few years and go, wait a second, let's get this straight. Small business owners, family restaurants, like family, Main Street restaurants, hardware stores, bookstores had to close down because they didn't have enough workers. And at the same time, you have immigrants that are literally risking their lives to get here so they can work in America. There is a solution to be had. And this is not a left-right issue. This is if you're a champion of small businesses, of entrepreneurs, of family restaurants, of family small businesses on main streets that are having to shut down because they can't find enough workers.
Hi, Sophia. Hi, Rose. Well, you're all dressed up. Where are you going?
The president is in town, so a bunch of us are going to his hotel to see his wife. I just loved her, and Father knows best.
Sophia, you're a little confused, honey. That was Jane Wyatt. The president was married to Jane Wyman.
That old crow from Falcon Crest?
Well, it doesn't matter. They're not married anymore. Now he's married to Nancy Davis.
From All About Eve?
That's Betty Davis.
The one who beat her kids with wire hangers?
No, that was Joan Crawford.
The fat cop from Highway Patrol?
That was Broderick Crawford.
The president was married to Broderick Crawford? And Mondale still lost? What an idiot.
How's this dress look on me?
What's the difference? In half an hour, it'll be crumpled on the floor next to an empty bottle of Jack Daniels. Blanche, I want to ask you a question. Who was the president married to?
Nancy Reagan.
Of course, the thin one. He helps out of the helicopter. This idiot thinks he's married to Broderick Crawford. Get some help, Rose.
Blanche, that outfit sure is risque.
Thank you. Would you just check my clasp for me? Now, all I need are those earrings you borrowed from me last week.
Blanche, I put those earrings back in your room.
Oh, no, Rose, not again.
Well, I know I didn't lose them, Blanche.
Oh, Rose, you're always losing everything. You lost our tickets to the Julio Iglesias concert. You misplaced 2 sets of house keys. You even had to have somebody help you find your car at the airport.
I know I didn't lose those earrings. I'll find them for you right now.
You better hurry up. I have to be there by 6 o'clock.
You've still got plenty of time. It's only...
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot all about your tutoring session.
Well, it's okay. We were just finishing.
Hi, Blanche. You look pretty.
You should see me if I had earrings. So what are y'all doing?
Oh, well, we just finished algebra.
Why do I have to learn algebra?
Because I had to learn how to teach it. And now I'm just checking the grammar in Mario's story for his English class. This is really terrific.
It's not terrific. It's just okay.
It is much better than okay. Blanche, I want you to listen.
Don't read it. You're going to embarrass me.
All right, I'll just read it from there to there, okay?
If you only read it from there to there, you'll miss the spirit of the whole piece. Take it from here.
The very first night he was in America, his uncle took him to a movie. He felt more excited than he ever had in his whole life watching that movie because of the feeling he got sitting in that theater with all those other people, laughing together, getting scared together. He felt like those people were his friends. To him, that feeling was the feeling of living in America. In America, you always felt like you were among friends.
Mario, that's just beautiful.
You should hear it when I read it. Hi, Rose.
Oh, hi, Mario. How about a nice snack?
Sure, I'm starving.
How about a nice herring salad sandwich on raisin bread?
Oh, wow. I'm gonna miss my bus.
That bus doesn't leave till... I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, Rose, Blanche. Adios, Teach.
Hasta mañana. I wonder if I should submit his story in the district contest.
I think you should. Oh, he's a very special kid, Dorothy.
Oh, he really is. I'm just crazy about him. He wants so much to learn. You know, he gets this look in his eyes when he's listening to me. You don't see that look very often. I think that look is the whole reason that teachers teach. Of course, there's a similar look that means I'm going to slash your tires. But an experienced teacher can tell the difference.
Dorothy, I'm going to a party tonight. Can I please borrow your silver earrings?
Well, of course, but why not wear the ones you usually wear with that outfit?
Would you like to feel that one, Rose?
Blanche, I have looked all over the house. I cannot find your earrings. But I found the Julio Iglesias tickets. Boy, we had great seats. Blanche, I feel just awful about this.
Oh, just forget about it, Rose. I never intended to keep those earrings my entire life, like my mama did. And my grandmama. And my great-grandmama, who fashioned those earrings herself from the Civil War bullets that killed great-granddaddy.